Dr. Schwartz, thank you so much for being with us on the show. And I really want to drill down and find out about our military men and women. You've been Commissioner of Veterans Affairs since 2003.
Yes.
How has the face of our veteran changed in the time that you've held that position?
Well, I came in just as the war in Iraq was getting underway. And there was a little small deployments of our military from the National Guard. And this was the first deployment. And what we were seeing then were a lot of the men and women who thought they were going to join the National Guard and get free tuition to Connecticut universities were now, and reservists as well, were caught in this. And
they went to war.
Yes, they were. I can remember one, at one send-off. She just graduated from high school, and now she was going to be an ambulance driver. So, and that was the great unknown also, because I don't think that people realized that we would be still in war these many years later.
Oh, 10 years.
And so what has happened is the heavy reliance on the National Guard and the Reserve. These are our neighbors. They are the people we see at church. They are the people that we pass on the street. They're not on bases somewhere in obscure places. And they have become, their needs have become our challenge.
Well, there's many tours of duty.
Oh, tell me about it.
I mean, I think I read about somebody who had 9 tours of duty. What does that do to a man or woman who goes back to the front?
We don't have any. We have no idea, and we won't know until this all stops. But this is a grave concern to me, because when we see some of our troops, with the employment situation being what it is, if they know they can be deployed, and they can go back to Iraq and Afghanistan. Unfortunately, some of them have been talked into, even if they have a service-connected disability and they're getting a compensation from the VA, they are signing away that benefit so that they can go back to Iraq and to the combat zones in Afghanistan. So they are already
depleted of
yes.
pretty much everything.
And many of them have not had a chance to really get decompressed from the original. The one thing that is also striking is so many more women are now in areas of the whole military that were, many years ago, were not even envisioned for women. We have women pilots, we have women who are commanding vessels at sea, we have them leading troops in combat. And also now we can boast the fact that they are on our submarines.
Let's talk about what your history is leading up to being the Veterans Affairs Commissioner. Talk to me about your service.
Well, I was an Air Force nurse. I come from a small town in Ohio, Wadsworth, Ohio, and I joined the...
Why did you join in the first place?
Why? Because actually every night on the television you would see the war and you would see the casualties and you would see that there was a lot of primitive conditions, and you said to yourself, it really did appeal to me, because I am a kind of I thought that when President Kennedy was talking about doing something for your country, he was looking at us and wanting us to stand up and do something for our country. So my father is a Navy man, and he was not really happy when he heard about I wanted to be in the Air Force. He kept trying to get me to join the Navy, but I read an article about flight nurses. It was in the Reader's Digest, and it seemed to be just a right combo for me, that this was drawing on all my talents as a tomboy and as a nurse. So I was stationed in a battle casualty staging area in Japan, Tachikawa. That was a place where casualties would come right out of Vietnam and stay with us.
And you're how old doing this?
22.
22 years old.
Yes, but nursing in the world was a little different then. Mm-hmm. You know, you had to be ready for things. So really saw war up close. And as a young nurse, I realized that the spirit and the camaraderie of the soldiers was something I had never seen in civilian life. And I made a conscious decision that this was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, is be in the Air Force. We had battle called Hamburger Hill. And on that night, we received about over 400 casualties at our hospital. And they were not necessarily, I had some patients who still had their battle dressings on from they were the ones that were being sent out because they were the least. And I remember that we tried very hard, the nurses did, to make their beds up and everything, and they just wanted a place to lay down. They were helping each other. They had chest tubes. It was something out of a movie.
What does seeing something like that, war up close, do to a person, both to the patient, to the nurse? How does that change you forever?
I think what it did for me was, it was not a movie, and what it brought home to me was that much of what we know about war, the real people, is never told. I mean, I can tell you stories that are heartening and they're sad. I can tell you of us trying very hard to help men who were blind and were coming home to be married, try to get their spirits up so that they could come home. I can tell you stories of real loss. And I'll just tell you one. Because we had a lot of multiple casualties, just like we have now. And you cannot imagine what it was like to be my age and to come to work in a unit where maybe you had 25 beds, but not one of the people in the beds had all their arms and legs. And some of them had no arms and legs. They were torsos. And that was in 1969 and 1970, not what we have today. And you wondered, what was their life going to be like? And I remember one who, they were able to get telephone calls, make telephone calls. We made a telephone call for him to his wife who was expecting a child. And I remember this, and he said, "I'm all right, honey. I'm just worried about you and the baby." So that is the real strength of what you witness, the real true humanity. And he didn't want to tell her what condition he was in, but that I'm okay, I'm just worried about you.
These are the heroes among us. Do you think that we as a nation thank our military men and women enough? Or do we look at them as, you're on the front lines, you're keeping the homeland safe, you're sort of invisible? Do you think that there's that kind of attitude sometimes?
I think it's becoming more and more apparent, because as the war has dragged on, it's harder and harder to get what our men and women who are coming home, what they really need. And although I think the leadership in Washington, and I can't say enough for General Shinseki, because he himself is a Vietnam veteran and he himself is disabled, so he has kept faith with us. But when you come home, now more people in the military have children. I couldn't be married when I was in the military. They changed that law.
It's different problems now, and
Yes.
they're homeless.
The homelessness, I mean, I deal with it on a daily basis. I can say that even today, a young man called me. Both he and his wife are disabled veterans. He lost his job. They're going to lose their house. We're going to try to do whatever we can to pull all the resources, both of them, the federal government and the state, to be sure that they can stay in their house. But there's a dynamic, and that dynamic is very different than what we had during the Vietnam War. We've been calling these men and women our heroes, our warriors, our war fighters. We have built up an expectation in them that, and they are proud, don't get me wrong, they are very proud, and they do a good job for us. But when they come home and they don't get the consideration of a hero, a warrior, or a war fighter, it's a very hard lesson. It's a reality. And I think that many of them, because they are so self-sufficient in the combat areas, they don't want to ask for the help. That's our biggest challenge, is to do the outreach. There are many services available, but we want to be sure that they know about this. Today the man who was calling, due to the generosity of many people, we have a temporary assistance fund. I can help him today.
But they don't know about you. They
Yes.
don't know about services. So how do we get the military men and women coming out of the military to know about all of this?
Well, the first thing is not a good thing. You can have, the Army can have advertisements on the television, but by law, the VA cannot advertise about its resources. So we do depend a lot on the media to help us spread the word about what we're doing. For example, our stand down, which was just a few weeks ago, we got a lot of good. It got out to the people. We had over 1,400 men and women veterans come to our place at Rocky Hill, and we were able to do a lot of good things in one day. And people say, well, it's only one day, but it's a beginning. It's and the word of mouth gets out to other people that you can go to the VA, or you can come to the Connecticut Department of Veterans Affairs, or you can go to our district offices. But the issue is VA cannot, by law, actually advertise in the private sector.
I have so many questions to ask you.
Okay, well, go ahead.
I am. You have an annual event that comes up every year that's a parade in Hartford. And
Yes.
arguably it's perhaps the biggest military parade
is.
in New England.
It is.
3,000 people marching. Tell me about it.
Well, I've grown up with this parade and it's a spectacular event because we have so many different veterans organizations and community groups that are marching, and it's a nice way for the people to say thanks to those who have served, not just the ones who are serving now, but I think some of the World War II veterans, we still have them, God love them, our Korean War veterans, and all the way down to we have the Waves, believe it or not. Connecticut has a very feisty group of Waves from World War II, and they get all dressed up in their uniforms, and they come forth. And for them, for the women veterans, it was not the welcome home that everybody else envisions or sees. Nobody was kissing the waves down there in New York City. But for them, it's a thrill because, again, it says something. It says, listen, you have not been forgotten, and we want to thank you. And so it's a wonderful experience.
About 20% of the military is now women.
Yes.
I think I read there are 15,000 veterans that are women from Connecticut.
Yes, there are.
How do we get folks to wrap around these folks and say thank you and not be forgotten? Because Veterans Day comes once a year.
Yes, you're right.
What do we do the rest of the year to remember what they did for us to keep us safe?
I think that we've tried to make a concerted effort to all of the events, anything, when people come, we have a Women Veterans Network here in the state of Connecticut, and it's really, it's not, we don't have bylaws and things like that, but we do a lot of things together. And so that outreach, our goal is to be able to say, if you live in such and such a town and you need some help, here's another woman veteran in your town that can help you. That's an informal network, but it appeals mostly to women because we are the caretakers and the caregivers. But I'll tell you, last year when we had the storm, knock on wood, we're not going to have it again this year, one of those ladies was without power, and she had some medical equipment that needed, she called us up. She said, I have no power, I need this, can I come to Rocky Hill?
So she asked for help.
Yes, because she knew about the network. And I said, well, I don't know how we're going to get to you. Well, she called another person in the town to come and take her, bring her down here. So she stayed with us at Rocky Hill till the storm, so she got power back. And that's the way it's supposed to work. And I think we have a unique opportunity here in Connecticut because we're a small state to really do a good job of covering. But you're right, there are so many, it's almost like a great flowering of many services that's hard to keep track of for the veterans. We have a website and we do try to keep it up. And I've come more and more to we've been doing outreach, especially with senior citizens, but also we have what we call the Yellow Ribbon. And this is mostly for our Guard troops when they come home. At the 30-day mark, they bring the troops from their return, they bring the troops and their families, because sometimes the euphoria of coming home we've kind of marked that it kind of starts to dissipate between 4 and 6 weeks. So people, they're just very happy, and they may not remember 9/10 of what you tell them. So having the spouse there is a good thing because they'll be informed.
After seeing war, how do you get back into society? And somebody said with these wars now, we have a lot of post-traumatic stress syndrome, as we did in every war, and we also have brain injuries that you don't see.
Right.
But they're so highly trained to kill or keep people safe. How do they integrate back into society?
It's very difficult. And we have here in the state of Connecticut, we have what we call the Military Support Program. We have trained and worked with over 400 clinicians throughout the state. They are in the towns and cities. Put them through a course called Military 101, and it adds to their practice and their understanding. There's also a 24/7 hotline that somebody really answers. And if you're calling in and need help with a mental health issue, they will give you the names of the therapists in our program. It's not my program, it's the Department of Mental Health. But I'm proud of it, as you can tell, that they will give you the names of the therapists in your area who can see you. And if there is no insurance or anything else, the state has set aside funds to reimburse the therapists for the care. But this is broader than the VA. VA is not yet geared up to be able to take care of families. So this military support program is in the community. It takes care of the people who are eligible are the military member, the spouse, the children, the parents. Sometimes the parents are the ones who are the first to notice that there's something gone wrong, the siblings, and the significant others. And by this network, we have been able to do an outreach across all of the towns and cities. If they need anything else, then we are able to bring those services to them. But it's a real
it's a huge problem coming home.
Well, I have to say the things that we don't understand, and I didn't understand well, but the whole thing with traumatic brain injury, the signs and symptoms of traumatic brain injury are so much like post-traumatic stress. And you don't understand, we're not talking about, you know, now in the football game when somebody gets a concussion and they walk him off the field and he leaves the field to play. But in Iraq and Afghanistan, when there's a roadside bomb and it goes off, and there's that jolt. And we know that with the explosion, first of all, the jolt of trying to right yourself against it. The second is a lot of people report they can't hear and they can't speak. Think about how vulnerable you would be if you knew someone was trying to kill you and you couldn't speak and you couldn't hear. That's not just once a day. That's almost pro forma throughout the day. And it's not, you don't get taken off the field, you get back in the saddle and you go the next day. So this is repetitive. And many of our men and women do not, their head is screwed on. Their head is in the game. Do not be telling me I'm having a problem with my head. But the concept of a blast concussion with some traumatic brain injury, we're at least learning more and more and have that. But many times, the person themselves, they have no sensitivity to that. They have no idea.
In wrapping up, and as I say, I could talk to you all day about all of this, how do we need to treat our men and women who have served in the military and wrap our arms around them so that when they do come home and the homecoming wanes and it's 6 weeks later and they've been on the front of a war zone as you have been, how do we best treat these people?
I am hopeful that the attitude of America now, when you compare it with Vietnam, is much more receptive and much more honor. The honor can only go so far. We cannot stop trying to figure out what is it that they need. How can we change programs? Can we develop programs that will really be more responsive to their needs? The old bureaucracy of some of our established agencies like the VA is not quick response. The state of Connecticut has a fine array of services, not just from my agency. It's important for people to remember that if If they're a citizen of their state, they get everything. And a good place to start is with the Department of Veterans Affairs, because I have service officers in every one of the congressional districts. All of them are combat veterans, and they talk, and you don't have to explain it to us because we know, and they are the ones that will help you navigate your way through this. We need to be sure that people know that we are there. We are not sitting at Rocky Hill. We are all over the place.
You're deployed, as it were.
Yes, we are.
And these are proud folks that have served.
I know, but the one thing is that they do know. There is a difference between a veteran. One thing we know about this generation, we know that they feel more comfortable with other veterans than any other people. And that's why we're kind of trying to leverage that interest as another veteran. You don't have to explain what it's like. We're just here to help you. That's our main mantra.
Well, Dr. Schwartz, thank you so much for being on, and I think we need to thank our men and women more that serve and salute them and tell them thanks.
Well, I thank you so much for your interest, and thank you for this opportunity. I think little by little people will get to, people cannot believe this is a problem or a situation that cannot be solved and resolved, and that it is a work in progress.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.